Thank you. The next item of business is a debate on cybercrime on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons. And I call on Audrey Nicholl on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee to open the debate. Up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I'm very pleased to open this afternoon's debate on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee. And can I start off with the usual thank you to committee clerks and SPICE colleagues for their support in this important piece of work. The committee has had a very busy programme this year with consideration of 4 separate bills at either stage 1 or stage 2 proceedings, so we were limited in terms of the amount of time that we had available to this inquiry. But we were aware cybercrime was an important topic that we wished to consider, especially in terms of business, vulnerable individuals and wider society. The short factual report that we have produced does not attempt to identify solutions. Rather, we wanted to identify the scope of the problem and stimulate public debate. So it's clear from the evidence that we've received that an increased focus on cybercrime and cybersecurity needs to be put front and centre, every bit as much as our focus on the risks posed to us by issues like climate change. So turning firstly to the impact on business. On the 14th of May, we undertook a one-off oral evidence session with stakeholders representing the police, business and vulnerable individuals. And this was followed up by written evidence from business and third sector groups and the Scottish Government. One issue which became immediately clear was the impact cybercrime can have on all levels of businesses and the vital role that they play within our society. We heard from NatWest Bank and Arnold Clark Limited. NatWest told us they currently have to defend against an average of 100 million attempted cyber attacks every month. This requires a huge ongoing investment in staff and technology, but it's an essential part of modern-day business. We also heard of the impact of a ransomware cyber attack on Scottish-based business Arnold Clark. And despite having an IT department of over 200 staff, 12 of whom were dedicated to cybersecurity, and with an IT budget of several £million per annum, cybercriminals were still able to breach their systems and steal large amounts of data. Now, this attack, which was deliberately undertaken over the Christmas period to make it far more difficult for the company to respond, had a very substantial impact on Arnold Clark's business, with about 4,000 customers affected. And while the company recovered quickly, we were told that they are still feeling the after-effects of this attack today. Now, I'm also aware that the Economy and Fair Work Committee has recently been taking evidence on the use of artificial intelligence amongst Scottish businesses. And latest statistics show 17.6% of Scottish businesses use AI daily, and that fraud accounted for about £1.7 billion in the UK last year, most of which occurred through social and digital media. And last month, Edinburgh-based content management system company Forit told the Economy Committee of AI tools it developed that, and I quote, have blocked 3.9 million cyber attacks in the past 3 months, close quotes, from one of their corporate clients. Now, this shows that we can develop effective AI tools to help protect business and our wider economy from cybercrime. So moving on to the impact on vulnerable individuals. Our committee also heard from Age Scotland on the continuously evolving nature of the threat to individuals. While phishing emails and scam phone calls still represents a major problem, new AI tools which allows criminals to manipulate their image and voice presents new risks to vulnerable groups. AI-enhanced fraud scams are making it increasingly difficult for people to identify that the person that they're engaging with is not real. And this allows criminals to build up trust with a victim, increasing their ability to defraud people out of cash or valuable data. Research by Age Scotland shows that about 20% of elderly people who experienced online fraud do not report it to the police. some from embarrassment, others because they believe the police could do little to help them. And we also learned that the type of fraud being perpetrated is now changing. In the past, criminals would simply have sought money, but there is now a focus on stealing personal data, which cybercriminals can package and sell on to other criminals on the black market. So helping the public stay informed about the evolving threat and encouraging them to report it to the police remains one of the greatest challenges we face. So on the policing response, prosecution and the law. So using traditional policing methods to address cybercrime is extremely difficult. The borderless nature of the digital world means it's virtually impossible to identify where a criminal might be located. Police Scotland told us that the action that they can take is often focused on gathering threat intelligence and finding out where the weaknesses are in the system. However, their ability to trace and prosecute a criminal who could be based anywhere is far more limited. The Cyber and Fraud Centre Scotland pointed out a loophole in the criminal law. At present, it is a criminal offence to handle stolen physical goods. However, no such crime exists for handling or making use of data which has been stolen in a cyber crime. This is an area which the law should seek to address. Now, I note that the UK Government's Cybersecurity and Resilience Network and Information Systems Bill has just been introduced into the House of Commons, and its focus is on security and resilience of IT systems that we rely on to carry out essential activities, as well as proposing stiffer penalties for cyber crimes. And I would welcome hearing about what discussions the Scottish Government is having with the UK Government on this bill. Now, this year marks the 30th anniversary since the launch of the Windows 95 home computer by Microsoft. Many consider this to be the start of the general public's move into the online realm. And since then, our everyday experience of the digital world has moved from being an optional extra to a central part of our lives. Anyone born after 1990 has grown up in the computer age. So a large percentage of our modern-day workforce is more cyber literate than our policies may recognise. But we must continue to invest in cyber training for all employees to ensure their resilience and awareness keeps pace. Now, unfortunately, many of our public sector IT systems have not kept pace, largely due to costs and the need to procure such systems on a large scale. Our evidence-taking on both cybercrime and the budget highlights the pressing need to ensure increased capital investment in vital public IT systems. And as we saw earlier this year, cyber attacks on retailers left many Scottish communities with empty supermarket shelves. And we also saw attacks targeting our local authorities, which impacted on schools and many other services. So our report points out a recent Audit Scotland analysis of a cyber attack on Western Isles Council, which highlighted various issues which local and national government must address. And we also heard about the need to ensure that key criminal justice sector organisations like the police, service, courts, prosecution and prisons are ready to meet new challenges as they move more of their operations onto digital-based platforms. Maintaining public confidence in how our criminal justice system responds to calls for help or gathering evidence of crimes must be central to the capital resources we commit to modernising our IT systems. So, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, as a digitally dependent society, we face many challenges from bad faith actors, both individuals and nations. They want to steal from us, sow discontent and undermine public confidence in democracy. Ensuring robust public and private sector IT systems and embedding cyber awareness as part of everyone's daily life must be central to Scotland's cyber resilience strategy. So can I thank again all of those who gave evidence to the committee, and I very much look forward to hearing the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Nicholl. I now call on Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance to open on behalf of the Scottish Government. Around 9 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's committee-led debate is an ideal opportunity to set out the current picture of cybercrime in Scotland and the actions we are taking and need to take across policing, government, business and civil society to prevent harm, protect victims and strengthen our national resilience. Cybercrime has changed the character of offending in Scotland. 5 years ago, Police Scotland recorded 7,710 cyber crimes. Today, it's 14,120, almost double pre-pandemic levels. These are broad estimates from police records, but the direction is unmistakable. More crime, whether fraud, extortion or exploitation, is now committed online or enabled by digital means. The public's experience measures this. The Scottish Crime and Justice Survey estimates 524,000 incidents of fraud and computer misuse in 23-24. That's roughly 1 in 10 adults affected. When organisations suffer a cyber incident, the knock-on effects on people can be severe. The Co-op cyber attack in April, for example, disrupted operations and supply chains, leaving some of our rural and island communities with empty shelves in local shops. When West Lothian Council's schools' IT systems was hit, many schools experienced operational challenges, although exams were not affected due to well-rehearsed contingency plans. But these incidents are stark reminders of the growing cyber threat and the importance of resilience across all parts of society. So what does this mean for our justice system? Our courts, law enforcement agencies and prisons handle enormous amounts of sensitive information, criminal records, evidence and personal details of victims and witnesses. One breach could expose this data, endanger lives and derail investigations. Cybersecurity isn't just about protecting data, it's about protecting trust. If systems are hacked or evidence is tampered with, confidence in fair trials collapses and with it the rule of law. Today, most evidence, emails, CCTV footage, forensic data is stored digitally. That makes it vulnerable to alteration or deletion, which could lead to wrongful convictions or acquittals. And let's not forget operational continuity. Courts and law enforcement rely on digital platforms for case management, e-filing virtual hearings, and a ransomware attack could halt proceedings, delay justice and create massive backlogs. Justice systems are prime targets for organised crime and even state-sponsored actors seeking to disrupt governance or influence outcomes. So cybersecurity is not just an IT issue, it's the cornerstone of justice, safeguarding the fairness, reliability and resilience of our digital legal systems. And that means prevention, early warning and having rapid, well-coordinated incident response arrangements are just as important as detection and prosecution. Police Scotland has strengthened its specialist capability in cybercrime, investigations and digital forensics. The newly established Cyber and Fraud Unit is consolidating cyber fraud and digital harm prevention under one command. Policing is also innovating at the front line, deploying digital forensic vans, digital evidence detection dogs and exploring AI-enabled efficiencies as part of the Policing in a Digital World programme. And these changes matter. However, we must be realistic about the constraints and challenges. Over 90% of crimes now involve some form of digital evidence, placing sustained pressure on our investigative capacity. The digital evidence sharing capability funded by the Scottish Government is tackling this challenge and is now live across all police divisions. Across the justice system, guided by the Christie principles, we must deliver integrated and secure services, providing better outcomes and best value for the public. Legislation must evolve too. The Computer Misuse Act 1990 remains the backbone of cyber-dependent crime, but it predates contemporary security research. A statutory defence for legitimate security research proposed by the UK Government is welcome, and we will continue to engage with the UK Government on this matter. And alongside this, the UK Government has introduced the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill, as mentioned by Ms Nicholl. And this bill will widen its scope to include managed service providers and data centres, harden essential services and strengthen reporting. For Scotland, this bill will matter, and some of our critical services and suppliers sit within its scope, for example, health and drinking water. And we will work with UK partners, regulators and industry to ensure smooth implementation. The Scottish Government's refreshed strategic framework for Cyber Resilience Scotland 2025 to 2030 sets the vision for a digitally secure and resilient nation. It's a renewed commitment to protecting our people, our organisations and our future in an increasingly digital world. None of this can be achieved by government alone. Prevention at scale is essential, and Scotland has established a national ecosystem to strengthen its ability to be more responsive and future-focused. The Cyber Scotland Partnership helps drive practical resilience and awareness across public, private and third sectors. The Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre, SC3, provides intelligence and early warning and manages incident response coordination for the public sector. In partnership with the National Cyber Security Centre and Police Scotland, the SC3 is helping us stay ahead of the threat and respond effectively to minimise the impact of incidents when they do occur. Recently, I launched the SC3 Cyber Observatory, which will gather and analyse cyber threat data and maturity insights from the public sector, allowing us to better target support and intervention. And we're also investing £300,000 this year to equip the public sector workforce with the skills needed to safeguard our essential services. In line with the National Cyber Security Centre, we are positioning Cyber Essentials as the baseline security standard for all organisations in Scotland. Alongside this, we are driving adoption of multi-factor authentication, encouraging regular backups, incident response planning and exercising. There are 5 priorities in our fight against cybercrime, Presiding Officer, and the need for a secure and efficient justice system. First is the importance of sustaining and targeting investment in policing capacity and completing the build-out of Police Scotland's Cyber and Fraud Unit and refreshing frontline digital tooling. Second is to build on exemplar collaboration programmes like the Digital Evidence Sharing Capability Programme to modernise our justice systems. Third, to enable legislation evolution so that our laws are fit for today and resilient for the future. And fourthly, scale prevention and skills. We must continue to build and enhance the capabilities of the SC3 and the Cyber Scotland Partnership and accelerate targeted prevention campaigns for specific sectors and communities. And finally, to embed accountability for public bodies and critical suppliers. We need to move to a place of mandating minimum security baselines and transparent risk reporting. Presiding Officer, cybercrime is now a mainstream risk to our economy, our justice system and to our economies and to our people. Scotland has strong foundations in place, specialist policing capability, evidence of a maturing public sector, the SC3, our National Incident Response and Coordination Centre, and an active partnership that reaches from government into business and civil society. And of course, our task is to lock in all of those gains. And our focus, as always, is to keep people safe, protect essential services, bring offenders to justice and ensure Scotland remains digitally secure and resilient. And I'm very grateful to the Criminal Justice Committee for their work on this matter.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Could I take this opportunity to remind all those members who are seeking to speak in the debate to please check that they have pressed the request to speak buttons. And could I now call on Sharon Dowie to open on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives? Around 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome this opportunity to discuss cybercrime in the Chamber and the devastating impact it can have on people and businesses. Can I also thank the Criminal Justice Committee clerks for all their work in arranging the evidence sessions and compiling the report. As has been made clear throughout the evidence session, this is a problem that is not going away. In fact, it is getting worse all the time, and there are more people doing it. The technology they are using is becoming more advanced. The criminals have more resources behind them, either in the form of serious organised crime gangs, who always get themselves involved when they think there is easy money to be made, or because of the increasing role bad states like Russia, Iran and North Korea are playing in this. It's a global problem, of course, but even the statistics for Scotland paint a grim story. In 2019-20, there were 7,710 estimated cybercrimes in Scotland, according to official recorded crime data. By 2024-25, it had almost doubled to 14,120. This equates to 38 incidents a day, covering everything from fraud and extortion to sexual abuse and exploitation. And we know that many such crimes are never reported, meaning the true picture is likely to be far worse. Presiding Officer, the question facing MSPs is what to do about this. In the first instance, we have to look to Police Scotland and the Scottish Government. I don't believe this particular matter should be the source of an intense political blame game. It's a hugely complicated and difficult subject matter. And even if there wasn't a single person in Scotland guilty of a cybercrime, the problem facing ordinary Scots from international threats would still be considerable. So my contribution to this debate is intended to be entirely constructive. The police do great work in this area, but they need more support. The difficulties facing the force when it comes to officer numbers and resources, not to mention the impossible environment in which they work, has been well documented in this chamber. But they also have a specific ask on this topic, and I would urge the Scottish Government to deliver in full. Chief Constable Joe Farrell has said Police Scotland needs £105 million to effectively just stand still when it comes to officer numbers, and that a further £33 million would enable her to strengthen the workforce. That includes £6 million specifically for tackling cybercrime. She has cited cybercrime as a major problem, while the Scottish Police Federation said the response to cybercrime is being weakened by a lack of cash. When she delivers her budget in the new year, the Finance Secretary must give the police every penny they need. Presiding Officer, this money is important because it has been proven that when the justice authorities are supported, they can make an impact. The banking protocol, where police work with bank staff to spot potential fraud in customer transactions, helped save Scots £750,000 in the first 3 months of this year. Hundreds of incidents were prevented, often involving elderly and vulnerable customers transferring money or handing over sensitive data to people who only wanted to exploit them and cause them harm. The Edinburgh-based Cyber Fraud Centre, headed up by Jude McCorry, has done some great work raising awareness and encouraging businesses to work together to prevent themselves and each other from being scammed. Its Cyber and Fraud Hub has helped more than 500 victims over the past year and stopped hundreds of thousands of pounds being lost, or in some cases helped people to recover what was lost. The organisation has also done great work in encouraging women to get involved in cyber security. Recent events brought around 200 women and girls together in the hope of guiding them towards a career in this area in the future. We are all well aware in this chamber that if we want the very best people to be involved, we cannot afford for 50% of the population to feel it's not a subject area for them. Presiding Officer, cybercrime targets the most vulnerable people in our society. The despicable criminals who indulge in this do so on purpose. Their merciless exploitation of elderly people, taking advantage of the possibility they are not up to date with technology or may be susceptible to being tricked, is inexcusable. Similarly, those who target young girls online in the hope of exploiting them sexually deserve the most severe punishments. In this country, we can only do our bit, while hoping international agencies and foreign governments step up too. Police in Scotland require more specialist skills, digital forensics and sustained investment. The Scottish Government must match its words with actions too, ensuring we have enough officers and capability in the wider justice system to bring those responsible to account. Presiding Officer, nobody is safe from cybercrime. From huge companies like Jaguar and Marks & Spencer's to small Scottish businesses. From major government agencies like SEPA to our smallest local authorities. From wealthy individuals who are robbed of thousands to vulnerable people who lose everything they own. That is why this problem deserves our utmost commitment and attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Dowie. I now call on Katie Clark to open on behalf of Scottish Labour. Around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to open this debate on behalf of Scottish Labour and as a member of the Criminal Justice Committee. And I want to thank my fellow committee members, the committee clerks and all stakeholders involved in the committee's work on this issue. This is both an important and timely report from the Criminal Justice Committee, with cybercrime rates across Scotland at a significant level. As Sharon Dowie said, more than 14,000 cybercrimes were recorded in Scotland last year, which remains well above pre-pandemic levels. Cybercrime amounted to 5% of all crimes recorded in Scotland last year, but digital technology and online spaces are being used to carry out more traditional crimes too. We can see this in the fact that cybercrimes amounted to 27% of all sexual crimes reported last year. In recent years, we have also seen several high-profile cyber attacks launched against both private companies and public bodies across Scotland. Major companies like Marks & Spencer's, the Co-op, Adidas and HMN have all been hit by cyber attacks this year alone. NatWest Bank also provided alarming evidence to the Criminal Justice Committee that their customers have to be protected from over 100 million cyber attacks every month. Glasgow, Edinburgh and West Lothian councils all suffered cyber attacks aimed at disrupting online education services earlier this year. Hackers also managed to access a significant amount of information from NHS Dumfries and Galloway last year, including the confidential details of both staff and patients. And in 2020, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, SEPA, endured one of Scotland's worst ever cyber attacks when thousands of its digital files were stolen. Whether it's cybercrime statistics or these examples of cyber attacks, it's clear that cybercrime is an issue that affects all of Scotland, individuals and organisations. Two common themes emerged in the evidence that the Criminal Justice Committee heard and how we can better protect ourselves from cybercrime in Scotland. The first theme was that the current state of Scotland's cyber resilience is inadequate and must be improved. Digital participation in Scotland has continued to increase, particularly amongst older people, with over 90% of adults now using the internet for work or personal activities. This is to be welcomed, but it also comes with greater risks in terms of cybercrime. Previous results from the Scottish Crime and Justice Survey have found that nearly 5% of internet users in Scotland had experienced computer viruses, received scam emails and had banking details stolen online. The Scottish Household Survey also found that nearly 10% of all adults in Scotland did not take any online security measures, such as not opening emails from unknown senders or sharing personal information online. That's why some of the proposals focused on improving cyber learning in the Scottish Government's Cyber Resilience Scotland framework are welcome. Embedding cyber learning into the school curriculum, expanding the availability of cyber learning resources and improving access to cyber learning opportunities for adults are all practical steps. The £300,000 allocated for an upskilling fund to strengthen cybersecurity skills across the public sector is also very welcome. However, I believe that the Scottish Government must do more to educate everybody, but in particular young men and boys, about the harm that far-right and misogynistic online content can have on their behaviour, and to tackle the resulting sexism, misogyny and violence in schools. And that's why I again call on the Scottish Government to bring forward a cross-campus strategy to tackle this issue, and do think this is relevant in this debate again today. Whilst education is vital in improving cyber resilience, we must also look at other avenues to achieve this aim, such as legislation. The Online Safety Act has now come into force, and I would urge the Scottish Government to work with both the UK Government and Ofcom to ensure it is effective, and especially that we look at it in the light of online child abuse reports in Scotland having doubled in a year. The Scottish Government should also make representations to both the UK Government and Ofcom that the provisions in the Online Safety Act relating to tackling fraudulent online advertising are implemented as soon as possible. And I would encourage ministers to engage with the UK Government and Ofcom on how the Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill will be implemented in Scotland, should it be passed by the UK Government. There are many other aspects to improving Scotland's cyber resilience, which I hope will be considered in today's debate, such as the need for regulation to reduce harms associated with AI technology, such as deepfakes, and ensuring that digital technology used in the public sector is better protected from cyber attacks. And I do welcome action that the Scottish Government is taking, for example, the recent announcement in relation to deepfakes. The second theme that emerged in evidence to the Criminal Justice Committee in relation to tackling cybercrime in Scotland is the need for a greater investment from the Scottish Government in cybersecurity. Organisations ranging from the Cyber and Fraud Centre Scotland to the Scottish Tribunal Service have all identified the need for further investment. The committee also heard from Police Scotland about the significant financial challenges it faces, already spoken about by Sharon Dowie, and how this impacts on its ability to tackle cybercrime. I hope that the need for greater investment in cyber security can be further explored in today's debate. It's important to note that the true scale of cybercrime across Scotland is likely greater than we expect, given that it often goes unreported by both individuals and organisations. It's also likely to be a bigger issue as we go forward. So I hope that the Scottish Government will reflect on all the points that I've raised today, and I expect other members will raise throughout today's debate relating to both cyber resilience and investment in cyber security.
Thank you, Ms Clark. I now call on Maggie Chapman to open on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Around 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to the Criminal Justice Committee and all who contributed to the inquiry for this timely and important report we are discussing today. Cybercrime and cybersecurity are often discussed as abstract, as technical or even distant issues. What this report makes unmistakably clear, however, is that they are none of those things. Cybercrime is not virtual harm, it is real harm. It is harm that lands on kitchen tables, in bank accounts, in workplaces and in the lives of people who are already too often carrying the heaviest burdens. The evidence gathered by the committee is sobering. While there has been a recent decrease in estimated cybercrime compared with the previous year, levels remain far above those seen before the pandemic. Cybercrime now accounts for at least 5% of all recorded crime in Scotland and for more than a quarter of sexual crimes. Nearly all crimes of threats and extortion are now cyber-enabled. Fraud, in particular, has been transformed by the digital environment, with almost half of all fraud now estimated to involve cyber methods. Behind these statistics are people, older people targeted by increasingly sophisticated scams, often powered by artificial intelligence and deepfake technology. Workers whose personal data is stolen and traded repeatedly long after the original breach. Staff in businesses and public services dealing with the stress, fear and disruption caused by ransomware attacks. Island communities left without access to food because the supply chain was digitally attacked. Local authorities unable to deliver essential services because their systems were compromised. This report rightly centres those human impacts And I want to thank all witnesses, but particularly those such as Age Scotland, who reminded the committee that many victims do not report cybercrime because they do not know where to turn, or they fear they will not be believed, or they assume nothing can be done. That is not a failure of those individuals. It is a failure of our systems. If people do not feel supported, trusted and protected, then our response to cybercrime is already falling short. The report also highlights a stark imbalance of power and resources. Large institutions like banks are able to invest millions in cyber defence, employing hundreds of staff to monitor and block attacks. Even then, as committee heard, and we've heard this afternoon, they are subjected to tens of millions of attacks every month. Small businesses, charities and third sector organisations simply do not have that capacity, nor do many public bodies forced to maintain ageing legacy systems while trying to meet growing digital demands. This imbalance matters because cybercriminals only need to succeed once, and that one-time success can be devastating for people. Everybody else, our protections need to work all the time. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Greens approach to this issue comes from a clear set of principles. We believe in safety and justice for all, but we also believe that how we pursue safety matters. We reject the false choice between security and rights. We do not believe that expanding mass surveillance, eroding privacy, or normalising intrusive state powers will necessarily keep people safer in the long run. In fact, history tells us the opposite. That means while we support properly resourced, skilled and specialist policing to tackle cybercrime, we will always scrutinise proposals that risk widening surveillance without clear necessity, proportionality and democratic oversight. Cybercrime is borderless and complex, but that cannot become an excuse for undermining civil liberties or treating everyone as a suspect by default. Instead, this report points us toward a more effective and more just approach. Prevention, resilience and accountability must sit at the heart of our response. Prevention means investing in digital literacy and public awareness, particularly for older people and other groups most at risk. It means ensuring reporting mechanisms are accessible, trusted and trauma-informed. It means recognising that shame and fear are powerful silencers and designing systems that actively counter that. Resilience means sustained investment in public sector digital infrastructure, not piecemeal fixes. It means supporting SMEs and the voluntary sector with practical help, not just advice they cannot afford to implement. And it means recognising cybersecurity as essential public infrastructure, not an optional add-on. Accountability means asking difficult questions of those who profit from insecure systems. As the committee heard, stolen data can be traded again and again, with devastating consequences, while responsibility is too often pushed back onto victims. We must look seriously at whether our legal frameworks adequately reflect the harm caused by the theft and trafficking of data, and whether corporations and platforms are doing enough to design systems that are secure by default. Yes.
Audrey Nicholl.
Member for giving way. I think it's just more to point out that one of the issues that emerged during the committee's scrutiny of this issue that I haven't touched on yet was perhaps sits in the resilience space, and that was the issue of insurance. So something that businesses are perhaps more able to absorb in terms of the cost of insurance, but how important that is in terms of a business's overall resilience to an attack.
Michael Chapman.
I thank Audrey Nicholl for that intervention, and absolutely, insurance is something that not everybody will be able to afford, not everybody will even think of needing to have, and I think that needs to go into our thinking about resilience and also accountability for when affordability makes it out of reach for individuals or for organisations. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, this report does not offer easy answers, but it does offer clarity. Cybercrime is not just a policing issue. It is a social justice issue. It is an equality issue, a workers' rights issue and a public services issue. Our response must be as interconnected as the systems on which our society now depends. I look forward to hearing the rest of the contributions this afternoon, and then to working together to ensure that Scotland's response to cybercrime is one that protects people, upholds rights and puts justice, not fear, at its core. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Chapman. And I call on Liam MacArthur to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Around 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I join others in thanking the members of the Criminal Justice Committee for allowing this debate to take place, probably more importantly for undertaking the detailed scrutiny of this important issue. I think Audrey Nicholl I think comprehensively set out the breadth of issues covered in the report. I think it leaves little doubt about the amount of work that will need to be done to address the many and various challenges going forward. I mean, cybercrime often leaves victims, whether individuals or organisations, harmed in profound and lasting ways, and were we in any doubt about that, the subject of the item of business that preceded this should have dispelled that, the horrific exemplification that grooming gang abuse, I think, reflects in terms of the way in which online harms are, as Maggie Chapman said, very real harms. Those that have been the target of cyber-enabled fraud can see their life savings lost and their personal data harvested. I think the convener rightly pointed to that being often more of the motive for perpetrators necessarily than cash these days. Individuals subjected to the non-consensual distribution of private sexual images face enduring trauma, and companies whose online systems are compromised by hackers can be held to ransom, can lose decades of work and the trust of customers. I think Katie Clark and Audrey Nicholl both spoke to the extent to which large organisations can find themselves the subject of millions of attacks over the course of a month. The investment they put into IT departments trying to kind of brace against that, the cost of that to business. But I think Maggie Chapman is right. While they may be most at risk and most in need of putting that resilience in place, resilience is something that all organisations, public, private, third sector, need to have. Much of the crime is not new, but technology is allowing it to be carried out in different and more effective ways and targeting a wider cohort of potential victims. The growing use of AI and other emerging technologies mean this trend is set to continue and get worse, as Sharon Dowie, I think, rightly said. So how do we rise to meet those growing challenges? Well, I think more of a focus by Parliament, including the type of inquiry carried out by the Justice Committee, is a start. As legislators, we need to develop a detailed understanding of what is happening and how this is likely to change if we're to put in place appropriate and robust safeguards and protections. Of course, the nature of these issues means we will require a collaborative working approach between parliaments and governments, not just here in the UK, but internationally. Building greater cyber resilience into systems and networks across the public, private and third sector is, as I said, though, crucial. So too is the need to continually raise awareness amongst the public of the risks and how to minimise these. Talking of which, you see the scale of the challenge when cyber-enabled fraud is estimated to account for nearly half of all frauds in 2024-25. The committee heard, perhaps unsurprisingly, that this type of crime increasingly targets more vulnerable groups, including the elderly. Demographic trends with an ageing population and the pace at which technological change is happening feels like a bit of a perfect storm in that respect. Perpetrators evolve and adapt their techniques and tactics, making the work of Police Scotland and community organisations and others through public awareness campaigns exceptionally difficult. We are dealing with the ultimate moving target. But that's why Scottish Liberal Democrats have been clear in calling for Police Scotland to have enhanced support in this area, to be given the tools that they need. I'm grateful to the SPA for their briefing, which sets out, I think, many of the ways in which Police Scotland have sought to invest and adapt to that changing challenge. I suspect over the past decade, when there's been a bit of an obsession with officer numbers, for reasons I understand, we perhaps have lost sight of the debate we need to have about the type of skills and the resourcing that policing requires now and into the future. Staying one step ahead of organised crime gangs and other types of criminals is not straightforward, but our police and indeed our entire criminal justice system need to be given a fighting chance, and I think others have pointed to the need for resourcing to enable that to happen. As an islander, I was interested but not surprised by the evidence given by Jude McCorry of the Cyber and Fraud Centre on how island communities are at a particular risk, that left without food supplies due to cyber attacks on supermarkets and supply chains. I think as we look at trying to address the digital divide, recognising that the digital space is levelling the playing field, it's opening up access to services in a way that is hugely beneficial, it does at the same time, I think, expand the risk of where people are susceptible, individuals and organisations are susceptible to being victims of fraud. And as somebody representing an island community, I see that very vividly. So if we continue to move towards modernisation of critical services, which is clearly necessary, we must be prepared to address the myriad of cybersecurity risks that will accompany that process. And finally, it would be remiss of me not to return to the growing issue of online sexual violence and abuse, which has been amplified by the availability of deepfake technology and other generative AI tools, and which disproportionately, of course, impacts young women and girls. To be clear, this is an issue that has been driven, I think Katie Clark made that point strongly, largely by the rise in toxic masculinity in our society, and will therefore require reform on a systemic level. Education will be key to changing attitudes, but there will also be a role for industry to play in this as well. Technology companies should not be given free rein to introduce new tools, systems or platforms into the market unless they've been built with safeguarding and responsibility in mind. Regulators must be proactive while also making clear the responsibilities and obligations on technology companies that operate in this space. I think my final conclusion, as a former member of the Criminal Justice Committee, I don't want to tell the current members of that committee what they should be doing, but this feels to me the sort of issue that in a legacy report should be recommended for something that future committees return to on a regular basis. And putting my conveners group hat on for a second, it feels to me also an issue that would benefit from cross-committee working going forward. But for now, can I thank Audrey Nicholl again and the members of the committee for allowing this debate to take place. We will need to do more of it, but this has been a decent start. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms MacArthur. We will now move to the open debate. I would advise members that there is some time in hand. With that, I call Jamie Hepburn to be followed by Davy Russell. Mr Hepburn.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I very much welcome the opportunity to speak of this debate on the very short report that the Criminal Justice Committee has published on cybercrime and cybersecurity in Scotland. It published just last week. Unlike Liam MacArthur, I'm not a former member of the committee, I'm a current member of the committee, but I wasn't at the time that they undertook this activity. So I commend the convener and my colleagues for the work they undertook. And the report makes very clear that cybercrime is no longer a marginal or a technical issue. It's now a central challenge for justice, for economic security and for democratic resilience. Whilst the most recent figures show a reduction in recorded cybercrime compared with the previous year, as Katie Clark set out, levels remain significantly higher now than they were before the pandemic. And as Police Scotland told the committee, they estimate that cybercrime constitutes around 5% of all recorded crime. Cyber-enabled offending now makes up a substantial proportion of fraud, sexual crime and threats and extortion. So its impact is very real and it is significant. And even then, of course, those figures tell only part of the story because, as Sharon Dowie mentioned, many cybercrimes will go unreported, particularly where victims feel embarrassed, feel uncertain or maybe feel powerless. Something that we know is often a feature of someone's experience when they have maybe been caught out by a scam. And the evidence from Age Scotland that I thought was particularly striking in highlighting the impact of cybercrime on older people. AI-enabled scams, impersonation and increasingly convincing fraudulent communications are eroding confidence and causing real distress. And the fact that a significant proportion of victims do not report these crimes should concern us deeply. Prevention, education and accessible reporting mechanisms are therefore essential. And of course we should recognise that cybercrime does not affect all people or all organisations equally. Larger institutions, banks for example, have the means and the ability to invest heavily in sophisticated cyber defences. The evidence from the financial sector illustrated both the scale of the attack they face and the scale of the resource required to defend against them, whilst not denigrating, of course, the seriousness of the impact on our financial institutions. By comparison, small businesses, charities and, of course, individuals simply do not have their capacity, yet they are also exposed to the threat of cybercrime. That imbalance is one of the challenges I think we need to consider as we move forward. The committee did hear evidence from businesses such as Arnold Clark, which demonstrated that even well-resourced organisations can be brought to a standstill by a single successful attack. The consequences were not limited to data loss or financial cost. Individuals were affected as well. Customers were stranded, staff were unable to work, and essential services were disrupted. So we should also bear that in mind as well. When a business is impacted, it's also individuals who are impacted too. Cybercrime should therefore not just be understood just as theft, but as a form of disruption with tangible human and economic consequences. And that same point applies in the public sector. The point has been made about the substantial attack on SEPA that occurred, but cyber attacks on local authorities, public bodies and supply chains can interrupt education, social care, food distribution and transport. And an increasingly interconnected digital environment, disruption in one system can quickly cascade into many others. That reality, I believe, should concern us all because it speaks directly to societal resilience. And I also believe, and this has been touched on in the debate, I believe it is important to recognise that not all cyber threats originate from criminal networks motivated solely by financial gain. We now operate in a global context in which hostile state actors routinely use cyber capabilities as tools of influence, espionage and destabilisation. Attacks on public institutions, democratic processes and critical infrastructure demonstrate that cyber activity has sadly become a normalised instrument of hostile state power. And Scotland is not insulated from those dynamics. Our public services, our universities, our research institutions and our digital infrastructure are part of a wider international system. Hostile cyber activity may not always target Scotland directly, but it can still have direct effects here, whether through attacks on UK-wide systems or on supply chains or through disinformation, which I believe is one of the greatest challenges of the age that we are in, but they are designed to undermine trust in democratic institutions. The overlap between state-sponsored cyber activity and organised criminal methods, including ransomware and data theft, further complicates detection and response. So that's why coordination and partnership are so critical. Effective responses to cyber threats, whether criminal or state-sponsored, depend on close cooperation between Police Scotland, UK agencies, international partners and the private sector. I so therefore welcome the continued engagement with the National Cyber Security Centre and the work of the Cyber Scotland Partnership and the Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre. And just picking up on Liam MacArthur's point, I think he is probably right. There has been too much of an emphasis in some of our considerations around headline figures of police numbers. We should be turning our attention to our police force and indeed other parts of the system properly equipped to respond to the threats we actually face just now. And of course that's through, I see the convener wants to intervene. She may be about to make this point, so I'll make the point, see what the point she was going to make, but through the budget scrutiny that the committee is undertaking, that's some of the consideration that we will be having to give in relation to the evidence that has been provided to us thus far.
Audrey Nicholl.
Member for giving way. Just on the point that the member is very eloquently setting out with regard to response and how organisations or individuals respond, I think one of the points that came out in the committee, and this was narrated by Arnold Clark, was how they responded to a unique event, an unusual, significant and serious one, and what to do, particularly when a ransom was demanded. So that's a really important part of the overall resilience strategy.
Jamie Hepburn.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that speaks to the need for us to ensure that Scotland continues to build its own cyber resilience and the elements of what have been laid out by Audrey Nicholl must be part of that. And indeed, the refreshed Cyber Resilient Scotland framework for this year to 2030 is, I believe, an important step in that regard. But of course, it has to be matched by investment and practical support, particularly, I think, for smaller businesses, charities and community organisations that might lack in-house expertise. There is also a broader question about whether our legal frameworks are keeping pace with the realities of cybercrime, particularly in relation to stolen data. The harm caused by data breaches can be repeated and prolonged, affecting victims long after the initial attack. Presiding Officer, let me close by saying cybercrime sits at the intersection of criminal justice, economic security, national resilience and democratic trust. It is driven by organised crime, enabled by rapid technological change and increasingly exploited by hostile states seeking to undermine open societies. Addressing it requires more than reactive enforcement. It requires prevention, partnership, investment and public confidence. And I agree with Liam McCarthy that this is an area that warrants further attention. It should be something that Parliament continues to give its attention to.
Thank you, Mr Hepburn. I call Davy Russell to be followed by Rona Mackay. Mr Russell.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Also the Criminal Justice Committee for bringing this debate forward. I am sure that I am not alone in worrying about the rise of cybercrime in Scotland. We can see from the Crime and Justice Committee's report that cyber criminals were able to double their output nearly overnight in response to the pandemic as their supply of in-person victims dried up. In addition, certain crimes lend themselves to be much more readily to becoming cyber crimes, with statistical propensity for sexual crimes and crimes of threat and extortion. New technologies such as deepfakes and generative AI have all enabled a whole new kind of fraud and deception. Many of our constituents are either worried that they themselves will fall victim to an AI-generated request for money, or that of a loved one will. And that pales in comparison to the violation of deep-faked pornography imagery. The Scottish Government must ensure that Police Scotland are adequately resourced and prepared for the crimes of the century and beyond, not last century. And that includes ensuring that the police have the powers to investigate and act where a new type of crime has been committed. This means Parliament must be swift, flexible and bring in appropriate legislation accordingly. But being able to identify crime will not in itself be enough. As often as not, the culprits exist far outside the UK, and a stronger cyber defence is paramount in this issue. Schools should be a first port of call in giving children the experience of identifying unfriendly links and invitations. This needs to be an active government initiative and not simply hope that teachers that are already hard threats will be able to rise to the challenge. Schools and community centres should also be hubs where parents and grandparents can learn what to do when their child, or even they themselves, fall victim to cybercrime, because it will be a learning curve for us all. Maybe we should resurrect the old 50s public information films, just to make people aware. I've also been approached by many older residents who are out of their comfort zone with digital platforms. This was recently highlighted by the Bank of Scotland decision to close the last branch in Larkhall, with many feeling that in-person services were the last backstop between them and cyber criminals. The Government should do all that it can to protect in-person banking services to prevent, in particular, older constituents from falling victim to financial cyber crimes. Some criminal ploys have existed for a long time, such as fleecing emails and malign links on social media, often in the guise of bots. However, AI has brought a new level of ability to mislead vulnerable groups and businesses, in fact, in an industrial scale. I would hope that all my colleagues would be against these things, but I read a few weeks ago that the First Minister was in favour of the Iranian bots because they are pro-independence for some reason. That aside, everyone in this chamber will have been on the receiving end of some point or other of abuse and insults, which is basic cybercrime because of some point of view that we've maybe had in the past. However, enabled by social media, which, however, should never be considered acceptable. As with cyber criminality in any shape or form, regardless of how it is manifested, when it comes to this type of crime, these are committed by calculated cold villains, and no one is immune. The Scottish Government needs to be industrious and dynamic in its legislation to protect the public and businesses and to prosecute criminals with vigour. No doubt the worst is yet to come. When it comes to cybercrime, as technology rapidly improves, those currently considered immune from AI deception may be the most vulnerable, and it may be that entirely new types of cybercrime emerge far beyond what we can comprehend today. Presiding Officer, we are at the start of a fantastic journey where we will see lots of great things. However, we should take heed, as we don't know where we will end up or what perils await in these uncharted waters.
Thank you, Mr Russell. I now call Rona Mackay to be followed by Fulton McGregor. Ms Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We're all potential victims of cybercrime, and the sad fact is that thousands of people in Scotland have been. Since 2019, the number of recorded crimes has doubled from 7,710 to just over 14,000. And that's probably the tip of the iceberg, because these are the numbers that are recorded. So we all rely on websites, apps, systems and data in our daily lives, and while they bring great benefits, the convenience comes at a cost. Cyber offending coupled with online harm is increasing, whether that's people seeking to exploit the vulnerable or using online activities as a vehicle for offending behaviour. It is indeed the growing crime of our times, and that's why cyber resilience and digital safety is more important than ever. And I'm really pleased to hear of the many Scottish Government initiatives that the Cabinet Secretary outlined. Cyber threats are evolving rapidly. Technology is ever-changing and becoming more sophisticated, and it's our shared responsibility to meet the challenges facing Scotland. And that's why I was pleased that the Criminal Justice Committee took such valuable evidence to allow us to produce a report on cybercrime about where we are now and where we must go in the future. We listened to fascinating but chilling, sometimes evidence from banks, charities, retailers, Police Scotland and organised crime experts about the toll it's taking on them to combat the ever-growing scourge. We learned that some cyber threats can't be realistically fully mitigated, regardless of how much preventative spending takes place. Major systemic vulnerabilities often have roots in legacy technologies and outdated practices, and so wider digital and cultural transformation is often required to tackle the underlying cause. For other risks, making the best use of the systems and services already in place is often more effective and better value for money than buying in advanced security solutions. On the plus side, there's no doubt that the digital economy is driving Scotland's economic growth and shaping our future, and it brings great opportunities. The Scottish Government's approach is built on strong partnerships across sectors, reinforcing that collective effort is critical to safeguard people and unlock the economic potential of our secure digital future. This includes continued engagement with UK Government and the National Cyber Security Centre on reserve security matters, alongside our European partners. And that's why the Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre promotes effective detection and response processes with a strategic framework. The framework details actions and supports to help people, businesses and organisations across Scotland to recognise and prepare for the inevitable cyber threats. In addition, the Centre's Cyber Observatory in particular will be vital in alerting organisations to potential threats. The Centre aims to improve incident response, recovery and intelligence sharing, and to get a much better understanding of cybersecurity. Presiding Officer, collaboration is at the heart of the SNP Government strategy because no government can tackle cyber challenges alone. Scotland is no exception. Speaking about the challenges of investigating cybercrime, Assistant Chief Constable Stuart Houston of Police Scotland told the committee these crimes are often borderless and are on occasion perpetrated out with the UK. Quite often, a network of people are involved in the larger ransomware attacks. In the past, organised crime groups would operate in networks of people who knew one another, but we need to be alive to the fact that people now operate in networks where they've only seen someone through a screen. David Keenan, Chief Information Officer with Arnold Clark, who have been mentioned earlier in the debate, spoke to the committee of the impact of a major cyber attack that happened to the business in December 2022. It was a ransomware attack in which a large amount of sensitive customer and corporate employee data was stolen. And the criminals deliberately planned the timing of the attack over the Christmas period, when staffing levels in the organisation would be reduced and therefore take longer for their staff to detect and respond to. Mr Keenan said in the days immediately after the attack in Arnold Clark, when we were unable to operate our systems for a period, more than 4,000 customers were expecting to come and make use of our services. More than 700 people who'd bought a car were expecting to take delivery of that vehicle. And some 2,000 people who had either had their car in for a service or had booked in to have their car serviced were unable to have that work done. And they were unable to provide the rental service to more than 1,500 people who planned to make use of it, many of whom were holiday makers travelling from abroad. That was the direct impact on our customers. But he went on to say that the cyber attack also had a major impact on the well-being of staff of Arnold Clark and their ability to do their job. He said that at the time of the incident, we'd well over 200 members of staff in IT with a multi-million-pound budget of 12 members of staff who were dedicated to cyber security, but that still was not enough to protect us. Ultimately, a cyber criminal has to be lucky only once, but we have to be lucky against every single attack. I thought that was a very well made point. In her oral evidence to the committee, Chief Constable of Police Scotland, Joe Farrell, said poverty, geopolitics, cybercrime and civil unrest are driving a high level of demand, and the challenge for policing is evolving rapidly. That's illustrated by the increase in online harm and threat and violence associated with organised crime, as well as a high level of protest. The threat is now. Presiding Officer, I think that's a fitting remark to end with. The threat is now, and we must continue to innovate ways to combat it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mackay. And I call Fulton McGregor. Mr McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And like others, I'm delighted to speak as a member of the Criminal Justice Committee. Scotland thrives when it is confident, connected and secure in today's world, and that means being a digitally secure and resilient nation. Digital technology can no longer be considered a separate sector of our economy. It underpins almost everything we do, from how businesses trade and grow, to how public services are delivered, to how families stay in touch, to how communities organise themselves. Digital systems shape our daily lives and Scotland's future prosperity. They are driving economic growth, opening up new opportunities and helping Scotland compete on a global stage. But that opportunity, as others have said, brings responsibility. As our reliance on digital technology grows, so too does the importance of cyber resilience and digital safety. We all depend on websites, apps, systems and data, often without even a second thought. They make life more convenient, more efficient and more connected. Yet in a digitally connected world, convenience does come at a cost. Cyber threats are increasing in scale and sophistication. Cyber offending and online harm are rising, and whether that is criminals seeking to exploit vulnerable people, disrupt essential services or use online activity as a gateway for wider offending. And these risks are no longer abstract or confined to large organisations, points that were made to us as a committee. They affect individuals, families, small businesses, charities, schools and public bodies alike. In many cases, crimes we once thought of as traditional, like fraud, domestic abuse, stalking, exploitation, they've all now have a clear cyber or digital dimension to them as well. And the reality has profound implications for policing and public safety. And the SPA actually wrote to the committee this morning ahead of this debate. Police Scotland's 2030 vision, launched last year, recognises this changing landscape with a clear focus on safer communities, less crime, supported victims and a thriving workforce. And crucially, it includes a commitment to strengthen Scotland's response to cybercrime and fraud, including the establishment of a dedicated cyber and fraud unit and the development of a specialist skills and training across the workforce. The Scottish Police Authority provides robust oversight of this work through the Policing Performance Committee, ensuring transparency, scrutiny and public accountability. We're already seeing tangible progress. Police Scotland has established its Cyber and Fraud Unit, which will continue to evolve as demand grows. Work is already underway to join the UK-wide fraud and cybercrime reporting and analysis service, helping to improve intelligence, consistency and victim support. And alongside this, the Policing in Digital World programme is equipping officers and staff to respond to cybercrime using the 4 Ps approach: pursue, protect, prepare and prevent. Innovation is playing a vital role. The introduction of tools such as the Child Abuse Image Database with facial matching technology has transformed how officers work, using artificial intelligence to reduce the time spent reviewing images and allowing greater focus on identifying victims and safeguarding children. Digital forensic vans are helping to speed up investigations and reduce the length of time people are separated from their devices. Police Scotland's cyber alarm is supporting businesses and organisations across Scotland to identify vulnerabilities and protect themselves from attack. Yet we must be clear about the scale of the challenge. The number of recorded crimes with a cyber element continues to grow, and new performance measures introduced by Police Scotland show a rising volume of cyber-tag crimes. But those figures still overly underestimate the true picture. Many offences, from fraud to domestic abuse, are enabled by everyday technology and leave a digital footprint, even if they are not yet consistently recorded as cyber-related. Improving our understanding of this complexity is essential if policing resources are to be directed effectively and victims properly supported. Digital forensics is therefore central to modern justice. The ability to identify, extract and present digital evidence is now integral to investigations, yet demand is increasing faster than capacity. The Scottish Police Authority continues to scrutinise Police Scotland's approach to building a sustainable digital forensic capability, recognising that evidential integrity, public trust and victim confidence all depend on it. Meeting these challenges is a shared responsibility, and government does have a vital role to play, but it cannot act alone, a point that's just been made by Rona Mackay. The SNP government is determined to do everything it can within its powers to strengthen cyber resilience, working closely with Police Scotland, the Scottish Police Authority, the UK Government and the National Cyber Security Centre on reserved matters, and with our European partners where appropriate. Our wider approach is rooted in partnership. We work with industry, academia, the third sector and local government because collective effort is essential if we are to safeguard people and unlock the economic potential of a secure digital future. Collaboration is not an optional extra. It is the only effective response to threats that constantly evolve. This is why Scotland places such emphasis on preparedness, detection and response. The Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre plays a crucial role in promoting effective incident response and recovery, helping organisations to act quickly and confidently when incidents occur. This work is guided by the strategic framework for a cyber resilient Scotland, developed with partners, and the Cyber Scotland Partnership. A key development within that framework is the Cyber Observatory, which will strengthen intelligence sharing, improve early warning of emerging threats, and help target support where it is needed most. Together, these efforts help ensure that cyber resilience is embedded across sectors rather than treated as an afterthought. A secure digital environment builds trust. Trust enables investment. Investment supports growth and inclusion, and growth in turn strengthens Scotland's ability to thrive in an increasingly digital world. Cyber resilience at its best fosters confidence. Confidence to innovate, confidence to connect, and confidence that Scotland is ready to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. By continuing to work together, we can ensure that Scotland remains not just digitally connected, but digitally secure, resilient and fit for the future. And, Presiding Officer, again, like others have said, including Liam MacArthur, I want to thank the Justice Committee, particularly the clerks, for allowing us to have a good scrutiny of this, and I think it's something that we need to continue to scrutinise well into the future, particularly as the threat of cybercrime grows. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McGregor. We now move to closing speeches. I call on Maggie Chapman to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Around 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm very grateful for the contributions made during this debate this afternoon. What's been clear across the Chamber is a shared recognition that cybercrime poses a profound and evolving challenge for Scotland. Where we may differ is not on the seriousness or urgency of the threat, but on how we respond to it. This committee report that we debate today is careful, evidence-based and grounded in lived experience. It shows us that cybercrime is not confined to laptops and servers. It reaches into every corner of our society. It disrupts businesses, undermines public services, damages mental health and erodes trust. And it does so in ways that disproportionately affect those with the least power and the fewest resources. That is why the Scottish Greens will continue to argue that any response to cybercrime must start with people, not technology alone. Victims must be believed, supported and protected. Reporting systems must be clear, accessible and properly resourced, and prevention must be given at least as much weight as enforcement. All of this means, as Lee MacArthur and others noted, ensuring that the education, awareness raising and support we provide to people must be appropriately tailored for the right audiences, whether older people at risk of scams, young people spending more and more of their lives in digital spaces, or organisations holding valuable data and information. Sharon Dowie? Yes.
Lee MacArthur.
I'm very grateful to Maggie Chapman for giving way. I think the point she makes about ensuring that the pathways for reporting cybercrimes and frauds is as empathetic and supportive as it can be. I think, as a number of members have observed, oftentimes there's a sense of shame at what has happened. And I think particularly with elderly people, I think there can often be a sense that admitting to this may call into question capacity, which may have wider consequences as well. So, as empathetic and supportive as we can be, I think it is inevitable that it's going to be very difficult to get everybody to a space where they feel confident in reporting these crimes.
Maggie Chapman.
I thank Lee MacArthur for his intervention, and yes, absolutely, but that is why we need to take a holistic view of this and ensure that everybody who supports older people can have those conversations and reassure people that they won't be treated as daft or stupid, and that their admissions of, oh, yeah, this happened to me, won't be an excuse to change their care situation or anything like that. I think that's absolutely imperative. Sharon Dowie, Davy Russell and others spoke clearly about the need to ensure Police Scotland has the resources it needs. I want to be clear, we support investment in specialist skills, in modernised systems and in cooperation across borders where crime is transnational. Police Scotland, the courts and the wider justice system must be equipped for the world we now live in, not the one we wish still existed. And this might mean some challenging conversations with some people. Policing is changing and we cannot just do more of what we did decades ago, even if that's what some people expect or want. Some of our legislation, as we've heard this afternoon too, will need radical updating in order to be fit for purpose. But I will also continue to sound a note of caution. Cybersecurity must not become an excuse or a gateway for expanding intrusive surveillance or weakening fundamental rights. Safety built on fear, secrecy or overreach is not sustainable. Trust is not created by treating everyone as a potential threat. It is created by transparency, accountability and respect for human rights. Several members this afternoon, including Rona Mackay, Fulton McGregor and others, have spoken about artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. These developments raise urgent questions, not only about how crime is committed, but about how power is exercised. We must ensure that new tools do not deepen existing inequalities, embed bias, or create systems that are impossible to challenge or understand. We've also heard this afternoon from Jamie Hepburn and others that our public services, and indeed many of our services, the services we all rely on at different points in our lives, are targeted by different ill-intentioned actors. So we must ensure that these services and the infrastructure they rely on are secure and resilient, not just patching systems that are already creaking under the strain of technological advancement. The report also reminds us that responsibility cannot rest solely with individuals. Too often, people are told to be more vigilant, to be more careful, to be more cyber aware, while operating in digital environments designed without their safety in mind. We need stronger expectations and regulations on organisations, on platforms and suppliers to build security into systems from the outset and to take responsibility when failures occur. Presiding Officer, cybercrime exposes the cracks in our social and economic structures. It exploits isolation, poverty, underinvestment and digital exclusion. Addressing it effectively, therefore, means addressing those underlying conditions as well. I welcome the committee's decision to draw Parliament's attention to these issues, and I urge the Scottish Government to respond with ambition as well as urgency. Cyber resilience must be treated as core public infrastructure. Support for small businesses, for charities, for local authorities must be practical and sustained. And any legislative or policy changes must be rooted firmly in human rights and social justice. The challenge before us is not simply to become more secure, but to become more just. If we rise to that challenge, Scotland can lead not only in technological resilience, but in showing that safety and freedom are not opposites. They are mutually reinforcing partners. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call on Pauline McNeill.
Thanks to the clerks and the witnesses who gave evidence to draw up this report. I actually found it very interesting. Maybe if you were an onlooker you wouldn't find this as interesting, but the subject matter I found really interesting, and I think it drew to my attention the importance of the Criminal Justice Committee taking time out to tackle this. Because cybercrime is around double that of pre-pandemic levels. We're living more of our lives online, as we know, and so our children are too, as individuals, more exposed to the risk of cybercrime. In fact, it's one of the most serious threats to national security. If anyone got the chance to watch the Panorama programme, it's definitely worth watching. It's actually quite scary. Cybercrime is usually associated with data theft and ransomware, but it also includes offences such as child abuse and human trafficking. With its growth, it just isn't affecting large corporations, but small businesses, as Maggie Chapman and others have said, are commonly targeted as they tend to have weaker defences. I think an important point was made by David Russell, work that I've been doing myself on intimate image-based abuse, is the deep fake alarming rise, not just in other areas, but in pornography in particular. And I think it's very important that we're vigilant and legislate accordingly. I welcome Police Scotland's recent establishment of the Cyber and Fraud Unit. The pressure on Police Scotland to investigate crime that is increasingly complex due to a cyber or digital component is greater than ever. It's also extremely important that we have the relevant expertise in our National Crime Agency to be able to deal with this, because there are clever people behind these crimes, as we know. The Chief Constable Joe Farrell told the Justice Committee last month that there has been an increase in the use of cyber to commit crime, including fraud. And she also noted that money laundering was on the rise, which I was surprised at, if people still use money. But obviously, in a cashless economy, I think the greater threat is the vulnerabilities to individuals, as many members have talked about, and to the economy itself. The Chief Constable also noted that there had been a dramatic rise in reports of online abuse of children, and she said that last year Police Scotland received just in excess of 700 notifications in relation to suspicions, information and intelligence about online harm relating to children, and in 1 year that number increased to nearly 1,500. And the Chief Constable went on to say that we are seeing online-enabled violence against young people. Online child abuse takes many forms, but it can include sexual exploitation, grooming, as we know, communication with children for a sexual purpose, but it also includes sexting and cyberbullying. But the most common type of cybercrime remains ransomware attacks that Rona Mackay talked about. There is a type of malware that prevents you from accessing your device and the data stored on it, and it works by encrypting your files. There's an astonishing number of companies who have paid the ransom, although they won't maybe say that they have done. Miles Bonfield from the National Crime Agency said at a Criminal Justice Committee earlier this year that ransomware that is being used for financial gain remains the foremost serious organised crime cyber threat to the whole of the UK, and that includes Scotland. There were estimated to be 19,000 attacks on UK businesses last year, and the typical ransom demand was about 4 million. And the one probably most familiar to most people is Marks and Spencer's, who fell victim to an attack, with hackers managing to blag their way in quite a simple way into the system, as we now know. The company's online store was closed for 7 weeks, and it's reportedly lost over 300 million in lost profits. Marks and Spencer's won't say if they paid the ransom, but the low likelihood they did, because reports tell us that 25 to 30% of companies do pay the ransom, so it's a profitable crime. And now there's some debate about whether outlawing ransom payments, especially for public bodies, is the right thing to do. Ransomware attacks are one of the most difficult and challenging crimes to investigate, but also one of the most profitable for criminals. So early detection is important, as once files are locked by hackers, it is extremely difficult for anyone else to unlock them. And the scale of the threat is staggering. Chris Ulliott from NatWest came to speak to the committee as well this year, and he said that attacks are probing the bank's estate, averaging about 100 million attacks per month that try to break past the organisation's defences. 100 million a month, that is quite scary. Ransomware is also a national security threat. We can't lose sight of the fact that it is a borderless crime. Many of the hackers based in Russia or the United States or states that were previously part of the Soviet Union. And in 2022, a Russian-speaking hacker called Klopp breached the security of the South Staffordshire water, providing drinking water to 1.7 members of the public. And this is one of the cases that's covered by Panorama. And Panorama showed a graphic representation that they believe that there was a serious threat here that could have resulted in the poisoning of the water. But of course the water company said that they wouldn't have been able to do this. But it's still worth studying that as an example of how serious this can be. And this year, West Lothian, a group going by the name of Interlock, attacked 12 schools, stealing data, including personal or sensitive data. It is unclear if we are ready for a cyber attack which targets Scotland's public bodies and other vital services, but the message is clear that we need to be. 2 years ago, the UK Parliament's Joint Committee on National Security warned that there is critical infrastructure in the UK that is vulnerable to ransomware. And the report warned that the UK is unprepared for the high risk of catastrophic ransomware attack, which could cause severe disruption to the delivery of core government services, including healthcare and child protection, and has the potential to bring the country to a standstill. The digital space is rapidly growing, a growing frontier of crime, and Scotland needs to be better prepared to tackle the dangers it presents. So, Presiding Officer, I believe that the importance of this report is obvious, but I think in years to come, looking back to future parliaments, I'm sure the existence of this report will show how important it was to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call on Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Listening to the debate today, one thing should be clear to us all. Cybercrime is not a niche concern. It's a widespread problem that affects more and more of our society. The Chief Constable has spoken about the, quote, significant growth in digital crime. And the Chair of the National Cyber Resilience Advisory Board has described how cyber attacks are now a growing norm. And the statistics, some of which we've already heard today, underscore that this is a widespread and growing problem. The Scottish Government's own crime figures show that more than 14,000 cybercrimes were recorded in 24-25. That's the equivalent of almost 40 a day. Within that, there were more than 4,000 cases of sexual cybercrime, including almost 1,500 involving children, and more than 7,500 cyber fraud cases. To show just how much cybercrime underpins crime as a whole, consider this. More than a quarter of sexual offences feature cybercrime. Likewise, almost half of all fraud cases and almost 95% of threats and extortion. Presiding Officer, I think we all recognise the scale of the problem and the serious risk that it will only grow given the advent of artificial intelligence. But if we expect the police to tackle it, then we must also recognise they require specialist skills, such as digital forensics, cryptocurrency experts and data scientists. And the advent of AI is only going to add to that complexity. The Scottish Government needs to be in listening mode here, specifically listening to Police Scotland when they say that they need almost £6 million to bolster their cyber capabilities. We all understand there are budget pressures, but I would point out to ministers almost 1 in 10 Scots experienced fraud last year, of which almost 40% involved cybercrime. And that Scotland's small businesses are estimated to lose an eye-watering £384 million a year to cyber attacks, according to analysis by Vodafone. Happy to.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank the member for giving way. Just on the point that the member was making with regard to Police Scotland and building capacity to respond to cybercrime, would the member agree that it's also very important that our skills strategy across Scotland takes account of our future needs, not just across policing but other sectors, including businesses, with regard to cyber resilience?
Maurice Golden.
I wholeheartedly agree with the member, and it's not just skills for Police Scotland, for businesses, it's actually even individual householders and consumers in protecting themselves against, as far as they can, against cybercrime. But in terms of Police Scotland, I think that the £6 million is a relatively small sum in terms of government expenditure and a small price to pay to help prevent and mitigate serious harm to individuals and businesses. And I'm sure ministers don't need reminding that the Scottish Police Federation has been warning for some time about the risks of underfunding the police. Ignoring such warnings simply means we end up playing catch-up to the criminals. Presiding Officer, the police need the training and the tools to combat cybercrime, but the police can't do everything, which is why it's important we ensure the public is well informed on how to protect themselves from cybercrime where possible. Earlier I spoke about the widespread impact of fraud, but what really struck me was the Age Concern reports that around 1 in 5 cyber fraud victims don't report it. That was down to uncertainty on where to make a report or that anything would even be done about it. That's important because reporting incidents helps the police gather intelligence on the criminals behind the scams. I think there's scope here for government to help educate the public, in the process helping to build valuable intelligence and build public trust in the police ability to help tackle the scammers. I also want to highlight a matter raised by the Scottish Chamber of Commerce in a letter to the committee, that of a growing gap between smaller and larger businesses when it comes to cyber security. They noted that their predominantly SME membership have raised concerns about falling behind on this front due to a lack of resources and expertise. They make the point that Cyber Essentials certification can cost small businesses more than £1,000. Not an easy ask when many businesses are running on razor-thin margins. I would encourage ministers to look at the SEC's suggestion of publicly funded training at a local or regional level to help reduce these barriers. Presiding Officer, in closing, I would urge the Scottish Government to step up and put the resources where they are needed: the police, public awareness and business support. Making that investment now will have a huge positive impact for many years ahead.
Thank you. And I now call on Richard Leonard.
No, Lockhead. Different Richard.
My apologies. Richard Lockhead. It was a test, Minister. Please go ahead.
I'm content to pass on the responsibility to the other Richard if he's here and he wants to reply. In my role, Presiding Officer, as Richard Lockhead, I want to begin by thanking the committee for securing this debate and add my thanks to that expressed by other members around the Chamber to the committee for bringing this very, very important subject to the Chamber today, and welcome all the valuable contributions from members across all the parties. As Sharon Dowie said, this is an issue that's not going to go away, and I have no doubt whatsoever that more and more of this issue will return to the Chamber in the years ahead. And as so many people have said, the message is clear. Cybercrime is not some distant threat. It's here, it's growing, and it affects every single part of our society. Public services, private businesses, charities, individuals, absolutely no one is immune. And again, as many people have said, cybercrime is not a victimless offence. It targets the vulnerable. And I should say, in that note, on a recent visit to Virgin Money in Keith, in my own constituency, the bank staff showed me how they'd help some customers spot scams and frauds, particularly vulnerable customers. So yes, vulnerable people are certainly targeted. Of course, cybercrime also exploits trust and undermines the very principles of fairness and equality that we want to strive to uphold as a country. So when a hospital system is locked down by ransomware, or when a small business, as many others have said, loses its data or is targeted, or when an individual's identity is stolen, these are injustices that ripple right through our society. Cyber resilience is not only about protecting victims, it's about safeguarding the country's future as a whole. Cyber resilience can no longer be seen as solely a technical issue. It really is a national imperative. Digital technology is the engine of our economic growth. It drives innovation, attracts investment and connects Scotland to global markets, as Rona Mackay said and others have said as well. We, of course, welcome that. But we also have to be absolutely clear that our economic ambitions will fail if we do not embed security and resilience at the heart of these ambitions. So every business transaction, every public service, every supply chain now depends on secure digital systems. A single breach can disrupt hospitals or courts or close schools or paralyse businesses and erode public trust. And again, as others have said, the cost is not just financial, it's about reputation, and it could undermine confidence in our country as a safe place to do business and to invest in and to work in and live in. So we also recognise that the rise in cybercrime affects all sectors and that we collectively, government and all our partners, need to work together to keep people safe and secure our public and essential services. We know that new and emerging technologies such as AI and machine learning bring again massive opportunities for the economy, for people, but it's crucial we are aware of the risks that they bring as well and the further opportunities that these offer to cyber criminals. The world is changing so fast and we have to change at the same pace. Cyber threats are becoming increasingly complex and aggressive, driven by nation-state activity, AI-enabled cybercrime and ransomware. So we see supply chain vulnerabilities, data theft and rising regulatory demands, and all of that will become persistent risks. We also need to recognise the ongoing geopolitical tensions, which add another layer of complexity to the cyber threat landscape. State-sponsored cyber attacks primarily target state institutions and critical infrastructure and are mainly aimed at data theft. But they can also seek to influence campaigns around important elections, something, of course, that we all are about to experience and take very, very seriously. Ministers certainly take the threat to elections and our democracy very, very seriously as well. But we are taking action. As the Cabinet Secretary said in her opening remarks, we've refreshed the strategic framework for a cyber resilient Scotland, which the Cabinet Secretary launched in November, to ensure our approach is current, ambitious and aligned with the fast-changing nature of cyber threat and cybercrime. So our vision is very clear. Scotland thrives by being a digitally secure and resilient nation, so we have to aim for that outcome. We do want Scotland to be a place where individuals, organisations and businesses are thriving in that secure and connected digital environment. And that does require a whole-of-nation effort and cross-party consensus. And I was pleased that some parties and members have expressed the fact we have to work together on this, and there has to be political consensus going forward. We have to build the structures to make this happen through the Cyber Scotland Partnership and the Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre. And we've got Police Scotland playing their role as well, as others have said, strengthening its cybercrime capacity, investing in digital forensics and the capability around that, and expanding international cooperation to pursue perpetrators right across the world. And Police Scotland has participated in a number of global operations working alongside the National Crime Agency, Europol and the FBI to target cybercrime gangs. We're also working with the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service to ensure prosecutors have the right tools at their fingertips and the expertise to bring cyber criminals to justice. And to support victims of cybercrime is also very, very important. Through Police Scotland and our partners, we are improving access to clear, practical advice for individuals and organisations. And we have to embed trauma-informed approaches for victims of cybercrime and ensure that support services are accessible and responsive. So we're investing in cybersecurity learning in schools as well to build the talent pipeline, which others mentioned was so important, Audrey Nicholl and others, with graduate pathways and diversity initiatives to ensure the cyber workforce meets future demand. And I remember when I was Higher Education and Further Education Minister, visiting many of our colleges and universities who are producing amazing people out of their cybersecurity courses, and they're playing such a valuable role for the rest of the country doing that. And in terms of industry growth, over 400 cybersecurity companies are now operating in Scotland, creating jobs and developing innovative products and strengthening resilience across sectors. Indeed, I cut the ribbon a few months ago at Acuben Cyber's Security Operations Centre, their new centre in Glasgow, a small Scottish company. And it was something to behold to see upstairs this massive screen on the wall and literally tens of thousands of incidents being monitored on the screen, and it just shows you what's happening out there that perhaps we're not aware of every second of every hour of every day. But we have a number of companies at the front line trying to protect us and keep our organisations and our economy safe as well. I could go on about a whole lot of other initiatives that are happening as well. I just want to say that we do have a lot of expertise in this country to tackle cybercrime. Yes, we'll have to always make sure that we are moving forward and that we have the right resources available and have all these discussions. This is a major threat to our society. It's a major threat to our economy. And as I said before, it was very good of the committee to bring this to the Chamber, because with technology advancing all the time, which brings opportunities but also threats, this is an issue that isn't going to go away, as we said. It's going to return to this Chamber time and time again, and we have to be in front of it, on top of it, and make sure we protect the people of Scotland and their economy at the same time. Thank you. Apologies.
Thank you. Thank you. I now call on Liam Kerr on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee to wind up the debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think that has been a really useful and important debate this afternoon. And on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee, can I thank all of those who took part, and also commend the Parliament for allocating time to debate what is such an important issue. Because our report set out in its second paragraph that our aim was to inform parliamentary debate and raise awareness of the impact of cybercrime and cybersecurity, which, given Rona Mackay told us that cases are at double pre-pandemic levels, shows just how important it is we put this on the agenda. Indeed, Pauline McNeill brought up the Chief Constable, telling us there has been a significant growth in complex, digitally enabled and globally driven crime, including reported sexual offending and fraud. But this debate really made that real. The committee has heard about the cost of cybercrime report, which, and note these figures are 14 years old, sets out the estimated cost of cybercrime to the UK was £27 billion per annum. That's 14 years ago. Maggie Chapman brought that right up to date, telling us of the recorded crime in Scotland statistics. Cybercrimes account for over 5% of total reported crime, including, as you put it, over a quarter of sexual crimes, nearly all threats and extortion crimes, and nearly half of all frauds. The Scottish Crime and Justice Survey said approximately 37% of last year's reported fraud involved cyber, like online banking scams, investment scams, phishing. And an estimated 4,070 sexual crimes recorded last year were cyber crimes, including nearly 1,500 involving victims under the age of 18. Jamie Hepburn and many others made the point that not all of these crimes will be reported. Maurice Golden brought in the Age Scotland evidence that around 20% of victims of fraud-related crime don't report it, so the true figures are likely to be much higher. And we've heard also this afternoon about some of the forms that these crimes take and just how disruptive. A Vodafone business survey estimated small businesses in Scotland lose about £386 million annually due to cyber attacks. Katie Clark told us that NatWest Bank protects us from 100 million attacks per month, and that requires huge investment to defend our money. Jamie Hepburn raised the attack on Arnold Clark in December 2022, in which a large amount of sensitive customer and corporate employee data was stolen. Now, that has a massive impact on employees, but also customers. Pauline McNeill talked about the £300 million in lost profits at M&S, whilst Liam MacArthur brought up the elderly who might be targeted through email or text message. And as Age Scotland told the committee, developments in AI and deep fakes can make things look very convincing and difficult to differentiate. So cyber attacks can disrupt us massively, as the Cabinet Secretary said, reducing trust in institutions and in our interconnected world, leaving islanders without food following an attack on the co-op. Looking specifically, the police told us how these crimes are often borderless. Rona Mackay raised what I thought was a very interesting point about how these often borderless crimes, it might involve networks of people who don't actually know each other except through a screen. And of course, at an individual level, life savings can be lost, data stolen, there's the trauma of non-consensual sharing of images and ransomware. But as the convener said when she opened this debate this afternoon, identifying solutions is not always an easy task. As she said, it is for the public, private, commercial and charitable sectors to work with government, the police and security services and key cyber technology partners to develop a whole society approach to cybercrime and cyber resilience. And I think an interesting point on this was made by Blaise Matravelli, the new MI6 DG, this week in her first speech. She said, "The front line is everywhere in our shared struggle against cybercrime." And we have heard there's lots of good work out there. The Cabinet Secretary told us of the strategic partnership via Cyber Scotland Partnership and the Scottish Cyber Coordination Centre. Rona Mackay told us of the Scottish Government engaging closely with the UK Government and the National Cyber Security Centre. The Scottish Government published in November 2025 its refreshed Cyber Resilience Scotland 25 to 30 strategic framework. The police have told us that they actively push out a prevention message, and also, whilst they're there to investigate and get an outcome, they're also helping businesses to recover from cyber attacks. And Age Scotland told the committee that people need to become more confident in reporting what has happened to them, something Maurice Golden was quick to highlight. So, Presiding Officer, how do we move forward from this debate? Well, Maggie Titmuss, MBE, the chair of the National Cyber Resilience Advisory Board, said, "The message is clear. We must be proactive. That means building the awareness to recognise threats, the discipline to reduce risk, and the readiness to respond swiftly and confidently when, not if, an attack comes." Fulton McGregor raised the SPA's update that we received this morning, which contains many welcome developments, including a new KPI which counts every crime where a cyber tag has been applied on the crime system to improve understanding of the scale and complexity of crime involving a cyber element and address the exact point that was made about reporting. On the police, Liam MacArthur made what I thought was a really important point. Cybercrime demands specialist policing skills, an investment in digital forensics, cyber and fraud specialists, cryptocurrency experts, data scientists, intelligence officers. Now, Sharon Dowie, right at the outset, reminded us of the importance to the police of funding and resources, but Police Scotland's budget submission explicitly requests additional funding for digital and cyber capability. Maurice Golden put it at £6 million, and I hope this is in the mind of the government when it comes to setting the budget. Bringing things back into this place, I understand the Criminal Justice Committee can look forward to receiving a written response from the Justice Secretary to our report by mid-February next year. In that, I hope the Scottish Government will take the opportunity to set out its progress with key partners in delivering the objectives of the Cyber Resilient Scotland 25 to 30 strategic framework. At that time, the Scottish Government might also update us on its progress with its discussions with the UK Government on ensuring that the new Cyber Security and Resilience Network and Information Systems Bill, which is currently before the House of Commons, is fit for purpose. It is my great hope that this bill will protect citizens and vital public and commercial IT systems upon which our society relies, but it's important we know about this right here in Scotland. Richard Lockhead told us of the many good companies who are working on the front line to try and protect us. Sharon Dowie went into that and talked about the Cyber and Fraud Hub empowering women to get involved in cyber security. And I think at this point it's important I note Marie McNair, MSP, has an event tomorrow on the National Cyber Security Centre Cyber First S2 Girls Competition, which aims to inspire young women with a passion for technology to explore careers in cybersecurity. I'll take the intervention.
Audrey Nicholl.
I thank the member for giving way. Just on the point that the members made about resilience and supporting organisations working on the front line, I wonder if I can maybe just make a shout out for us not to forget about funding, which can often be relatively small amounts, to support some of the organisations and third sector organisations that are working to do quite ground level, granular work, but albeit very important.
Liam Kerr.
I think that's a very important point, very well made, and something that I hope will be in people's minds, obviously during the budget process, but also during the Cyber Scotland Week 2026, which is going to be 23rd to the 28th of February, and representations like that will be very important at that time. A final point, Presiding Officer. Scrutiny responsibilities in this Parliament for issues around the digital economy like AI tools, safety and resilience, prosecuting cybercrime currently lies between the Economy and Fair Work Committee and the Criminal Justice Committee. As Liam MacArthur said, it is for members in the next session to decide what issues should be debated. But I think the point is well made that actually this is an issue that we really must keep in mind, and the Criminal Justice Committee needs to be very cognizant of when drafting its Section 6 legacy report to the successor committee. In closing, Presiding Officer, I would like again to thank all those who provided the Criminal Justice Committee with written and oral evidence on cybercrime and cyber resilience. It's been a really worthwhile piece of work. It's been a really worthwhile debate today. It's exactly the topic we should be debating and keeping on the agenda, and I'm grateful to all those who have contributed. Thank you.
Thank you.